Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's decision to speak at the Republican National Convention tonight is now under investigation by a House panel. In a letter sent to the Deputy Secretary of State, Democratic Congressman Joaquin Castro said Pompeo's speech may be illegal. The State Department has defended the Secretary of State's decision. Officials say he's addressing the RNC in his, quote, personal capacity. However, the move represents a significant departure from precedent as well as State Department policy. Just last month, a memo issued by the State Department barred high-level officials from participating in such conventions. Joining me now is Fleitz. He's the president and CEO of the Center for Security Policy and previously served as the chief of staff for the National Security Council under the Trump administration. Hello, Fred. Good to see you again. Thanks very much for being with us. So just last month, Secretary of State Pompeo warned State Department employees against engaging in partisan political activity. If it's not okay for State Department employees, how is it okay for the Secretary?
Well, Mike Pompeo is an advisor to the president. He is not a career government employee. He is an appointee, a cabinet member. I also note that he has a law degree from Harvard. I think he knows the rules and the laws in this situation.
But does it seem to be a contradiction, though, if it may be, permissible, and yet you have employees who are told not to engage in this partisan political activity? I hear what you're saying about, him being appointed by the president. However, can you see how that might look like a contradiction to some people?
If you're a career officer at the State Department, you're supposed to loyally serve Republican and Democratic presidents, whoever is in the White House. Pompeo is only at the State Department to serve President Trump. It's not the same thing.
It's not the same thing. Okay. All right. Well, let me turn to another topic here. So the Times of Israel reported that he's delivering his remarks from a, quote, undisclosed location in Jerusalem, where he met Monday with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Tell us what's significant about this location.
Well, it's very significant that Secretary Pompeo is speaking from Israel because of the tremendous gains that President Trump has made in our relationship with Israel and with Arab states. President Trump has repaired the damage done to our relationship with Israel by President Obama. He moved the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. He recognized Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights. And he has established trust, not just with the Israelis, but with Arab states, which led to this recent landmark deal between the United Arab Emirates and Israel, which could mean that there could be a long list of other states who are making peace with Israel and working with the U.S. and Israel to recognize that Israel is not the enemy in the Middle East. The enemy is Iran. And I think this is a huge gain for national security by this president. I think Secretary Pompeo speaking from Israel is making this point.
The president has approached foreign diplomacy differently than his predecessors. What would you say are the governing principles of President Trump's foreign policy?
It's been a successful foreign policy based on the president's philosophy of America first, which has rejected the old approach by deferring to the UN and European elitists in the foreign policy establishment and putting the American citizen, specifically the American worker, first. He's tried to keep America out of unnecessary wars, but still be strong, to stand up to Iran, to stand up to China, to confront China for fair trade deals, and to stop China from taking advantage of its entry into the international economic system. It's been fantastically successful, and this is something that we're going to hear a lot about tonight, and how this policy will be expanded into a second Trump term.
Why is the Trump administration eyeing new sanctions on Syria?
Well, as the situation in Syria has improved for President Assad, he is trying to build new relationships with states throughout the region. And this is something that the Trump administration wants to discourage. We want to keep Assad isolated. The president's not going to invade or start bombing Syria to drive Assad out. But we're not going to stand for a nation guilty of such severe human rights violations, a nation that is an ally of Russia. We're going to keep the pressure up on Syria.
What is the next step for the administration to build upon the recent deal between the UAE and Israel?
Well, we're seeing today, or I guess it was yesterday, when Secretary Pompeo was in Sudan, there was talk about trying to get Sudan to possibly sign an agreement next. I don't think Sudan will be next, but I think we could see Morocco, maybe Oman, also sign agreements like this with Israel. And I think that what they will be considering is that there will be real security and economic advantages for these nations in the region working together to promote the interests of their people, to stand up against terrorism, and to stand up against Iran.
All right, Fred Fleitz. Fred, thank you very much.